Seconds to go, 10 seconds to go. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to Books and Friends. Welcome to another special episode of the Books and Friends TV. I'm David Sccialpi. Great to have you here. Great to have you on board. Welcome on board for another super special live interactive Q&A, live interactive conversation with another super special guest order today. Joining me now directly from Boston, Massachusetts, a super professor. Is the number one professor on the face of the earth when it comes to business administration, when it comes to entrepreneurship, startups development, startups management, directly from the number one business school ever, Harvard Business School, where he is a faculty co-chair of the Hard Rock Center of Entrepreneurship, a former McKinsey partner and a co-head of its media and entertainment practice, is now out with his newest book, his newest work called Why Startups Fail. Here we go. Published by Penguin Random House. Here in the Books and Friends room with us for this new episode of the Books and Friends TV, Professor Tom EISENMANN, everybody. Good morning, Professor, and welcome to Books and Friends.
Good morning. So happy to be here.
Thanks to you. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for joining us, Prof. Super fascinated to catch up. Super honored to have you here. And super excited and galvanized to let the people know about your newest work called Why Startups Fail. On this, we're going to have a Q&A. We're going to have a conversation with all our participants, as well as going to get a little bit of insights and perspectives on the latest trends of the 2 days world of startups and entrepreneurship and strategy in the light of COVID-19 pandemic. Before getting into that, Prof, let me just remind to our participants and followers to they can join the conversation. So the ways to get in touch with us during this Q&A, so hashtag Books and Friends, join the conversation, bring your question, bring your comments, bring your reflections on all the things startups, development and management, entrepreneurship and strategy, as well as on why startups fail. Professor Tom EISENMANN is here with us to answer your questions and get back in real time to all your reflections. So don't be shy and don't miss this opportunity to interact with us. So we can get started with the Q&A, Prof. We can get I'd like to share a little bit of reflections on your book. It's a super book. It's an incredible handbook. It's an incredible guide. It's a masterpiece, in my opinion. It's a must read for entrepreneurs, startuppers that want to get more and they want to understand. They want to figure out how to avoid to make mistakes, how to avoid to fail, but at the same time how to win and manage a venture or stop properly and correctly today in our days. There is a Commonwealth version of the book, which is called the Fail-Safe Startup. Even this book is now available on Amazon. Everyone can buy that. Everyone can read it. But above all, everyone must walk, practice, and use that. So we can get started with the Q&A. Probably I'd like to ask you this stuff. I would like to ask you, what has brought you to publish this new book? What has motivated and inspired you to publish this new book? What's the purpose of this new book? And tell us more about this new research work and a little bit of behind the scene, and how have you articulated this new research work?
Sure. Thank you. And for folks, if you're in the UK, as David says, it's an identical book, but the title is different in UK and Commonwealth except for Canada. So Canada uses the US version, Why Startups Fail. UK Commonwealth is the Fail-Safe Startup. And the book, the idea for the book catalyst was 8 years ago. Things move slowly in academia. So I was working with a startup. They were two former students, and they had an idea that I thought was a terrific idea. I loved my former students. I thought they would be great entrepreneurs, and I loved the idea. I was an investor, and the idea was these were two tall women who had trouble finding work clothes that fit well and look good. So they wanted to create a company that would have better fitting, affordable, and stylish clothing for young professional women. The company was called Quincy Apparel.
Oh, yeah.
And I encouraged them, I invested, and they did everything right in the beginning. Many listeners will be familiar with a movement that came out of Silicon Valley called Lean Startup.
Oh, yeah.
And the Lean Startup idea is in some ways very simple. Take the scientific method of have a hypothesis and run an experiment and apply that to startups. And the lean part of Lean Startup is do that experiment with zero waste, no more effort, no more time, no more money than absolutely necessary to get a good signal, a reliable, rigorous experiment. And they did this. They in fashion, there's an idea of a trunk show where you create samples, you bring them to a room, you invite people to try on the clothing and then order it. And so they did this. They brought in groups of young women. They had samples. The women ordered. 25% of them placed an order, which is very high. The orders averaged $350. All great. So there's demand for this idea. The demand is there. They raised $1 million. They wanted to raise $1.5 million. That's part of the failure story. And they launched the business. The demand was there. The sales growth was strong. Repeat purchases, which are very important for a startup, were strong. The fit, remember, they're promising better fit. The fit was okay, not great for some of the customers. And so the returns, which when you in e-commerce, the return rate of people who buy online average about 30%. And that was their average. They were targeting 20% because the promise was good fit. And it's very expensive to process the returns. You have to send them a second item and so forth, and shipping back and forth, et cetera, and the customer service. And so they were building inventory, burning through their cash, making progress, but not enough progress to raise more money. They ran out of money and they shut down in 1 year. It was heartbreaking. They were crushed. Entrepreneurs who fail are always crushed. And I could point to a lot of things that went wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint the real cause, the root cause. And that was disconcerting, upsetting, because I was supposed to be an expert on entrepreneurship, and something like 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 startups fail. Yeah. And so it's one of the most important phenomena in my field. And, I was a failure at explaining failure. So, so I started a research project to talk to scores, 100 entrepreneurs and investors who back them, survey work, larger numbers, trying to get at the bottom of why. Read everything I could get my hands on, academic and work by entrepreneurs and investors. Wrote cases and launched a course, an MBA course on failure, all trying to get at the bottom of it. And here we are 8 years later. We have some answers. We have a book.
We have a research work about it. So, and this is very fascinating stuff because, usually books, traditionally classic books about, in the management literature and in the world of strategy, they tell us the secrets to win. So, and this book goes in the opposite way. So that's
very important. So that the idea was, if you figure out what not to do, you may improve your success odds. And some people may think, well, isn't failure just the photo negative, the opposite of success? And so if you do everything you need to do to succeed, then you're less likely to fail. Maybe, but actually, some of the things you need to do to succeed can lead to failure. It's a paradox. For example, to build a big successful startup, you have to grow. And growth, growing too fast is one of the main killers of startups. Growing too fast, growing with customers that are not profitable, growing in ways that the operations get out of control, that can lead to startup failure. So understanding failure is not exactly the opposite of understanding success.
Cool, 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 cool. And I still remember what Michael Porter said years ago. The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do.
Wow, very good, very good.
And also, Chan Kim and Malborn said, strategy is a set of moves, and the moves can be for avoiding obstacles, avoiding fails and failures, but also to, you know, to win and to succeed. So there are two kind of is the same is the side of the same coin, right? Might be that is the key reading, the reading key of this kind of approach. So let's talk about failure, Prof. And what is failure, and what does it mean, failure for a startup? How do we define that, and how do we define success? Because there's also, you know, usually when it comes to failures, when it comes to fails, there is an imagery that if you fail, you are a loser, and if you win, you are a superhero.
Yeah, so I don't use the word that way. That the word failure does, for in many circumstances, mean the person is a failure, a loser, like you say. But I don't use the word that way. The entrepreneurs in my book are all smart. They all had a good idea. And showed a lot of promise. So I should say that there are different kinds of failure. There's failure where the entrepreneur has no control over the circumstances whatsoever. COVID killed hundreds of thousands, probably millions of businesses around the world, young businesses. No blame for the entrepreneur, nothing they could do about it. They couldn't see it coming. And once it came, you know, if you had a restaurant, if you had a business that sent workers into people's homes, you were going to fail. And so there's not much to say about that. We should be heartbroken and we should have sympathy. But
predictable circumstances.
Yeah. And there's another kind of failure that's a good failure. And I talked about lean startup before, running an experiment. Sometimes the only way to figure out if your idea is a good idea is to launch it and run an experiment. If you launch, you have a good idea, and you try it, you run an experiment, and the experiment is negative. It says, nope, your good idea was wrong. Your hypothesis was wrong. That's a good failure. We should encourage entrepreneurs to do that. And they don't need my advice. They should keep doing that. And, you know, you run enough experiments with enough different ideas, you'll find a good one. So what I focus on in the book is promising ideas that failed through some mistakes that the entrepreneur made. Some combination of mistakes and misfortune. Misfortune, things they couldn't control; mistakes, things they could control. And I'm interested in. Of course, we all have many failures every day, every week, every year.
We fail every day.
I'm interested in the big failure, the end of the organization, extinction, but this is important. You don't need to shut the business down to be a failure in the way I think about it. So, in many countries, you can declare bankruptcy. You wipe out your debts. And sometimes a bankrupt company can continue. The original investors, they got zero, but the business can continue. So that's a failure in any sense. The definition of failure in the book is investors did not and never will make money. And it's tricky. Only professors love definitions. So let me expand a little bit. You might ask, well, why not the founder's objectives, right? You're focused on the investor here. Why not the founder, right? Isn't the entrepreneur the important one? And it's true. Founders have the objectives may be to build personal wealth. They may be to change the world in some way. And maybe just the excitement of building a team, launching a product, the process of being an entrepreneur. And all those are important objectives. But a thing to remember is for startups, as they grow and mature, they will very often change the entrepreneur will no longer be the CEO, the leader of the organization.
They can evolve.
Yeah, in 60% of startups that are backed by venture capital companies that reach the 5-year point are no longer led by the founder as a
Initial
CEO.
founder.
Yeah, exactly. And so, once you take a lot of outside money, there's some responsibility to the people who provided that money. So, the other thing we should keep on the radar is society at large. So a company can be successful financially and be one we wish a society would disappear. Pollution, addictive products that make income inequality worse. And the reverse of this is true too. A company can be a financial failure, but good for society in two ways. It shows other entrepreneurs what not to do. There's actually value in that. The investors don't get that value, but other people do, the entrepreneurs and the other investors. And then many failed startups, people will gain experience. The workers will gain experience. The managers will gain experience. And they will go off and do something good with that experience for society, create companies, create jobs. So the answer to what is failure is it's complicated. We care about the entrepreneur, we care about society, we care about the investors. But to keep it simple in the book, after explaining all this, I focus on, did the investors make money? It's a pretty good yardstick.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be great to get in some of the findings, Prof, and understanding a little bit about getting a little bit of sense about the patterns that in which we will probably get more obstacles, more potential failure, and understand how to we can deal with that, how to face them along the cycles, along the stages of the startup life cycle.
Yeah. So the book is in 3 parts. The first part looks at early stage failure, first few years. In this case, the company is still many circumstances still looking for the market, looking for the customers, trying to iterate the product, and assembling the team, the money, and so forth. And there are 3 early stage failure patterns, and in each chapter has a case study. At Harvard Business School, we teach by the case method. So we love cases, and then explains to entrepreneurs how to anticipate and avoid that pattern. I'll come back to the 3 patterns. Then part 2 is late stage failure patterns. So these are companies that are scaling, they're growing, 5 years old maybe. And again, 3 patterns, how to anticipate and avoid. And then the last part of the book is very important. So if you do your best with part 1 and part 2 and you still fail as an entrepreneur, part 3 is about how to fail well. How to figure out when to shut down the business if you're struggling, very hard decision, and then how to heal. There's great pain. How to heal, how to learn from the experience, and then how to figure out what to do next. So back to part 1, So 3 patterns. I talked about Quincy a few minutes ago, Quincy Apparel. And that's the failure pattern there I call good idea, bad bedfellows. And the bedfellows are all the people connected with the venture.
Bad company.
Bad company. That was the original name. Thank you. You may be old enough to remember the song called Bad Company, and I'm certainly old enough. My editor said, no, you can't use that name because that means that Quincy was a bad company, and they weren't a bad company. It was actually a very good idea.
Bad stakeholders, right?
Yeah, bad stakeholders. Less interesting than bad bedfellows. So the parties here, the people are the founders, the rest of the team, the investors, and many companies, entrepreneurs don't have a lot of resources, so they get the resources from somebody else, a bigger company usually. And for Quincy, there were problems with they had a good idea, but they had problems with all 4 types of people.
Internal problems.
Internal problems. So it starts with the founders. they were a great team in some ways, classic outside inside pair, one focused on the outside, one focused on the inside. Christina Wallace, she was a trained opera singer, and her job after college was at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, managing the divas. So, and she had charisma. She could sell the idea. Fantastic. And the other one, Alexandra Nelson, was an MIT engineer, disciplined, deliberate, analytical. So she will focus on the operations. Yeah. But here's the problem. The two problems, actually. The founders didn't have any experience with fashion design and manufacturing. They had an idea, but they had never manufactured dresses. The second problem was they were MBAs. Many MBAs think they should be the boss. So they both thought, I can be the CEO. They were best friends, and agreed to never let conflict over the business get in the way of the friendship. And so they agreed to share the CEO role, both make the decisions, which meant they talked through every decision. And sometimes they didn't agree, and it slowed things down. And entrepreneurs can't slow things down. You have to move fast. And so, but because they had no industry experience, no experience in fashion, they hired people. And it turns out that listeners may know that to design and manufacture apparel, there are many very specific steps. You have a pattern maker, you have a fabric sourcer, you have quality control, step by step by step. There's about 10 different steps. And so they found people in big fashion companies who knew how to do these things. And people who work in big companies sometimes don't adapt to the rhythms of an early stage startup. Early stage startup, everybody does a little bit of everything. They go wherever the fire is burning hottest. It's like 6-year-olds on a football pitch, right? Surround the ball, everybody kick the ball. These people didn't do that. They say, I'm the pattern maker. I don't know how to help with that problem. And so it was the wrong team. They hired for skill, but not for attitude.
So it's a matter of hiring, is an hiring issue, and it's a management stuff.
Both. Thank you. And not only hiring the wrong people, but not pushing them to
the right way,
and providing the example.
Organizational development is this.
And so I could go through the investors. They were the wrong investors. They should have found people that know how to invest in fashion companies, but they found tech venture capitalists. And what do tech venture capitalists want? They want a business that's going to go to the moon, grow fast. How do you grow an apparel company fast? You manufacture a lot of inventory, which is expensive. That uses a lot of capital. And you can make mistakes, right? Fashion changes. So you have to manufacture the stuff 6 months before you sell it. And if you got the fashion trends wrong, you have a bunch of inventory you can't sell. So the VCs pushed for growth. And they didn't have that much expertise themselves about the business. And then many young apparel companies will outsource the manufacturing to third-party factories. And these factories ignored Quincy, right? They had no reputation. They had no industry relationships. The factory would say, hey, my big customer needs something fast. We're going to move your order to the end of the line. And so all of these things went wrong, and they were fixing them, but not fast enough. And so at the root of a lot of it was not knowing enough about the industry of the business. So that was a powerful lesson for me.
Matter of experience, matter of industry barriers, and also matter of organizational development and
all of
skills.
That. David, the lesson for me was there are some startups where industry experience is very, very important. Food and beverage is another one. If you're going to manufacture a product that will go in a grocery store, a supermarket, really difficult. How do you find somebody to make it for you? How do you get the packaging right so it jumps off the shelf into the consumer's hands? How do you pay the store to display, you know, at the end of the aisle so people can see it? Many decisions you need experience with. There are other businesses that you don't need much experience.
No.
One of the next failure story in the book is a dating website.
Oh yeah.
And in a dating website, they get launched all the time, and some of them work and most of them fail. But the ones that work, those entrepreneurs didn't work in dating before. You know, everybody has some experience with dating, maybe, and they apply. They have some idea how my website's going to be different or better, and sometimes it works, and usually it doesn't. And so the lesson is sometimes industry experience is very important, sometimes not important. And entrepreneurs need to know which is their type, So the problem with the dating site was, I call it a false start.
False starts, okay.
False start, just like track and field or swimming, where the athlete literally jumps the gun, you know, tries to start before, to get an edge and gets penalized. And here, what the entrepreneur is doing is they're so eager to build and sell the product. They have a vision. It's burning bright. You know, I know, I can see around corners. I just know this is going to work.
They visualize
exactly
the revenue streams also.
Yeah, my IPO. Yeah, exactly. The cover of the magazine, etc. And these entrepreneurs skip a phase of upfront research. Every entrepreneur needs to spend some time exploring the problem. Have I really found an unmet customer need? And understanding. So somehow customers are solving the problem you're interested in. What's the problem with the existing solutions? And then, like a good designer will generate a lot of solutions and explore lots of solutions without building them all. Simple prototypes. And then narrow down to actually the right solution. And these entrepreneurs, the false start victims, they skip the problem, the customer discovery, the problem exploration, and they skip the development of lots of solutions. And they go right to one problem and one solution, a pair, and they build it. And most of the time it will miss. You know, there's some flaw in the logic. And it takes 4 months to build it, launch it, see if it's working, figure out what to do instead. And you could have, if you only spent 4 weeks on research, you could have saved 4 months. And if as an entrepreneur, you're bootstrapping, you're doing it from your own savings, you only have 1 year, 12 months of runway before you have to give up, and you waste 4 out of 12 months, it's a big problem. So, you know, it turns out many entrepreneurs are vulnerable. It's because the identity of an entrepreneur is somebody who makes things happen. So everybody wants to start. Some entrepreneurs are engineers. Engineers love to build things. So they start building too fast. The non-technical founders, the founders who don't have an engineering background, they hear correctly, you need great product to succeed as an entrepreneur. How do you get great product? You have great engineers. How do you get great engineers? You use your networking skills. You go out and you find, once that person's on the team, especially if you're paying them, they're expensive. So what do? You give them something to build. You give them the design. So there's lots of forces for every kind of entrepreneur to get started fast. And a lot of rhetoric out there, fail fast, just do it. And so the solution here is slow down a little bit. Invest the 4 weeks up front, think like a designer, explore the problem, explore the solution. And that's pattern number 2.
In this case, was a matter of marketing skills. It is a matter also of, you know, trying to understand to get a product out there, it takes time. Yeah,
and here the entrepreneur, this was a dating site. The idea was, I'm sure this is not going to translate culturally to everybody who's listening. There's a concept, at least in the United States, of a wingman in dating. The wingman is if you have a fighter jets, the lead jet and the jet over here is protecting the lead. That's the wingman. And so you go into a bar, with your friend, same sexual orientation as you, and it makes it easy for you to meet the potential romantic partner because the three of you can have a conversation. It's less threatening. That's the wingman. So this entrepreneur wanted to bring the wingman to online dating, and you know, it's an interesting idea. It actually is a terrible idea because if the wingman, you don't want everybody to see your your dating life, your failures, your successes. It's like, maybe I'll tell you later. I don't want you watching me online, number one. And number two, to build out the site, every feature had to be built both for the daters and the wingmen. And so it complicated the thing and slowed things down. So, and
so
if he had
startups need a industry experience, business strategy management skill before launching a startup.
Yeah,
right?
well, he just needed to do a little bit of talking to people about their dating habits, and you probably could have figured out just by talking to some people about this idea that I don't like it. And he didn't. And he eventually dropped it quickly. I mean, he was very nimble. Like once he figured out it was a bad idea, they moved on to other ideas. Anyway, that's the false start.
It's false start, yeah. Then we have false positive are also, right?
Yeah, false positive is number 3, and it's just like COVID testing. Entrepreneurs are subject to false negatives and false positives, just like COVID testing. False negative, it can be tragic. This is an entrepreneur launches the business, gets some signal that it's not working, but it really is a good idea. And they shut down, they throw in the towel, they quit. And 2 years later, they read, you know, on in the internet, on the newspaper, somebody with the same idea just, you know, launched a public offering for $1 billion or something like that. It's, I had that idea. I gave up. That's the false negative. The false positive is a signal that the early success is really strong. The first customers really love the product, and you push too fast in the direction of the success. And there is some success with the early customers, but the early adopters for a product are not always the same as the mainstream customers, the customers that have come later. Sometimes they have very different needs. You know, Dropbox is an example. I think probably everybody listening is familiar with Dropbox.
Absolutely.
The early adopters for Dropbox were software engineers who had incredibly sophisticated needs for file management.
So very big. It's a niche. Was a niche.
Yeah, exactly. And those were the first customers. But Drew Houston, the entrepreneur who built the business, he said he applied to the Y Combinator Accelerator. His application says, I want to build a product that is so easy to use, my mother can use it to store her recipes. That's what I want to do. And so he had real discipline. He understood the mainstream. He understood the early adopters. He made a very deliberate decision to keep the product simple. There were many features that the early adopters wanted. He said, no, not going to do it. And
let's keep it simple, right?
Keep it simple. And it was so much better than what they were using already. The early adopters loved it. You know, they wanted other things, but it still was very, very good for them. And they became missionaries, apostles for the product. And so that's how you avoid the false positive. You have an understanding of the difference, and you have a strategy. Sometimes the strategy is you do build for the early adopters, and you change the product over time to make it simpler, or you hide the advanced features. So there's lots of different ways to handle this problem, but you need a strategy and you need an understanding of the difference between the mainstream and the early adopters. So those are the early stage patterns. And false start is the big one. That's the real killer of early stage startups.
You know, no market need, no market skills. So it's a matter. It seems paradoxical, but it's a matter of skills. Probably these founders didn't, test their capabilities and their skills and competencies enough when it comes to marketing. So it's a matter of this is a marketing in my mind, because you got to understand the customers, you got to understand where they are. You have to talk with them, you have to bring them to talk about you, you have to constantly analyze new habits, new acts. So this is marketing.
100%. And the entrepreneur of the dating site was an engineer. He was great at building the product. They were so fast. They could build it, they could launch. they would see the customers do something and launch a new feature in 3 days. It was boom. But it took them they pivoted over and over and over. Try this, it's not working. Try something new, it's not working. Try something. And they were getting there. If they'd spent 2 more years, I think they would have had a great business. But you can't raise 3 years worth of venture capital. They give you 1 year at a time.
So it was an interesting stuff that I was fascinated by this aspect of catch-22 and the tactics to try to deal with that and try to solve this kind of situation which lots of entrepreneurs or lots of startups are used to get trapped or used to fall in.
Yeah, catch-22. I hope everybody knows what it means. It's an amazing book, set in Italy, by the way, right? Yeah. And a catch-22 is a logical impasse. It takes the form, can't have A without B and can't have B without A. So you can't get a job without experience, and you can't get experience without a job. In this case, the entrepreneur, you need resources. The definition of let's actually give a definition of entrepreneurship, because I think everybody thinks they know what an entrepreneur is, but there's actually some people think every small business is entrepreneurial, sometimes, but not always. So the definition we use at Harvard Business School of Entrepreneurship is pursuing novel opportunity, doing something new before you have all the resources you need to pursue that opportunity, right? That's the definition. Something new without resources. That's an entrepreneur. If you do something new with resources, you're Google. Drew Houston, when he launched Dropbox, he had a laptop and a thumb drive and an idea, nothing else. He knew some people, but he had an MIT computer science degree, but that's pretty much it. You need a lot more than that to launch a startup. And so he has to go get it. He has to get a team. He has to get money and partners. Google, when Google launches Google Drive, probably a lot of people are using Google Drive. A lot of people are using Dropbox. When Google launched Google Drive, they had armies of PhDs in computer science, whole gigantic teams, data centers everywhere, customers, hundreds of millions of customers. So they have the resources. So that's the difference. And an entrepreneur, here's the catch-22, you can't really pursue a novel opportunity without some resources, right? It takes a team, it takes some money, and you need to make some progress to pursue the opportunity, but you can't get the resources until you've made some progress. So you need resources to make progress, but to get the resources, you have to show some progress. So the challenge for an entrepreneur is to break the catch-22. And there are 4 different ways to do that. One is the lean startup method. Without resources, you run an experiment, a
minimum viable products.
Exactly right. Minimum viable product. And we know all about that. But sometimes people think they're launching a minimum viable product, but they skipped some other research. Number 2 is staging. So venture capitalists, big companies, when they approve a project, they give the entire budget for the project, start to, a year's. In big companies, capital comes in 1 year. Here it is in August. Next August, we'll think about whether we're going to give you 1 more year. That's not what VCs do. VCs look out just to 1 milestone. So we're going to give you enough money to build and launch the product, and then we're going to see if it's working, and then maybe we'll give you more money. It's called staging. And you get Series A, Series B, Series C, and so that's number 2. Number 3 is partnering. We talked about like with Quincy Apparel, finding the factory that would manufacture the clothing. And number 4 is storytelling.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I bet you do. So everybody has seen Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was the master storyteller. we use the expression for jobs, reality distortion field.
Yeah.
He can actually bend reality to his will. He's so mesmerizing. He will paint a picture of a future that you want, and you will work hard. You'll commit your company. You'll commit your time. His team worked 80-hour weeks for a year to build the original Macintosh, just because they were inspired. He wanted them to go out and put a dent in the universe. And so
flying cars also.
Flying cars, exactly.
I read the story of Agassi, and it was something very entertaining because, there are lots of new stuff coming up in the business world, especially we can pull in all the stuff about purpose. So having a higher purpose and poverty, stopping malaria, and, stopping COVID. Okay, but you gotta do that. Execution is going to be
and
hard.
So you mentioned Shai Agassi. He's the entrepreneur behind a company called Better Place. It was launched in 2008, 2009. The idea was a network of charging stations for electric cars.
Oh yeah.
Cars. The time he launched, they could only go about 150 kilometers, they go further now, but you still have to recharge them if you're going to take a long trip. And so the idea was have these stations everywhere, including battery exchange stations. So a car would drive in, a robot would pull out the battery that had no power in it, depleted battery, and put in a fully charged battery. Boom, 5 minutes, just like filling a car with petrol. And he built this in Denmark and in Israel. They raised $900 million. And Agassi was incredibly charismatic, the reality distortion field, a brilliant storyteller, and inspirational purpose, right? I'm going to save the planet. Fossil fuels are destroying the planet, and people believed in it, and they gave him a lot of money. And he had a hypothesis, but he wasn't very flexible. So sometimes the charisma, you put so much energy into propagating the reality distortion field, you can't see that the universe is telling you the idea is wrong. So he was too early, and there are other ways to solve these battery exchange stations. They required all the car manufacturers to design a car where the battery would be removable, and try to go to Ford and Mercedes and every car company on the planet and say, you're going to change the way you design your cars. It's not an easy thing to do. One did, Renault, Fiat, and they designed not Fiat, Renault, Nissan, designed a car that would work, and that's what they launched with. But so many things had to go right for Better Place to work. The company was called Better Place. Customers had to embrace electric cars. Governments had to subsidize electric cars. That all happened. I mean, it's happening now. So far, so good. He had to raise an incredible amount of money. He could do that because he was charismatic and a brilliant storyteller. The car companies, not just one car company, but all the car companies had to change the design. That didn't happen. This battery swapping had to be the right solution. And there's another solution out there. It's fast charging. And Tesla uses fast charging stations. So, you can charge a battery in 20 minutes. It does some damage to the battery, so you don't want to do it every day. But if you do it just, every couple of months for a long trip, it works okay. And these fast charging stations much less expensive than these robot battery swapping stations. So anyway, he was too early, and he made some mistakes with the solution, but he was attached to the solution and too stubborn to change, and that's the end.
Was a very interesting story. It was a fascinating story, fascinating a lot. So we got already a couple of questions, Prof. If you want, we can go for them. One is from Jacopo Derba, which is a startupper, and he asks this. So from your observatory, Prof, how important it is for startup startups establishing an adequate governance? Is it realistic governance also in the early stages of a startup, or it is utopia?
Oh, good question. We think of governance as something that big companies have with a board of directors, 15 people. It's actually, startups have in most cases, a better board of directors than big companies do. If you raise money from outside investors, any entrepreneur can create a good board and should create a good board. But it's the typical practice is when a venture capital firm leads a round of investing. So as I said before, the venture capital comes in rounds, one big clump, then 18 months later, 12 months later, another big clump. And every time you get a new round, the leader of that round gets a seat on the board of directors. At the beginning, there may be two co-founders. The board of directors may only consist of 3 people, 2 co-founders and the first investor. And everybody should know the most important job of the board of directors is to hire and fire the CEO. Yeah, that's governance. And there are many other things to governance, but ultimately the job of the board is to make sure the person leading the organization is the right person. And of course, if it's 2 founders and 1 investor, it's a majority vote. So 2 against 1, the founders are going to stay. The next round, it's now 2 against 2. We don't like that because it's a tie. So we add a 5th independent director who's agreeable to both sides. Good governance, right? Somebody that both think is going to add value. Yeah. But now if the CEO, the founder, is doing a bad job, 2 founders, 2 investors, 1 independent, you can throw out the CEO. And this happens. And so the other thing to know about governance in startups is in big companies, the board of directors may meet 4 times a year, once a quarter. And a good director will read a book that sort of says what's going on in advance, and they'll be engaged and paying attention at the meeting. In a startup, the board of directors meets once a month, 12 times a year. And the investors who are the directors, they'll be on the phone or on email with the entrepreneur all the time, 5 times a week. And so they're really closely involved. And the board of directors will introduce the company to new customers. They will help with recruiting. If we got to recruit a vice president of marketing or vice president of operations, the board will help do that. So the board is very actively involved. There are some potential governance problems with startups, but I would say on balance, it's number 1, crucial, and number 2, it actually works in many ways better than big companies.
Cool. Very fascinating point. We got another question. It is anonymous, but it's a very interesting question. Hello there. I was wondering, given all your years of experience, Prof, what would it be a thing that has never changed and you consider to be a must for any startup? Whilst on the other hand, what do you think is different nowadays, and how should we embrace this change?
So what's never? I want to make sure I understand the first part. What has never changed about startups?
Yeah. What the thing that has never changed and you consider to be a must for any startup?
So the definition of startups hasn't changed and never will change. It's doing something new without resources. So something new by its nature is risky. There's lots of uncertainty. So in some ways, a startup is a machine for managing uncertainty, for reducing uncertainty. And the challenge of that machine is it's just a person with an idea at the beginning. Now we have to go find other people, we have to find money, we have to find partners. And so that's the thing that will never change. The big change, I would say, in the last 12 years in entrepreneurship, I'm dating back to when Eric Ries started to work on the Lean Startup. The book was published 10 years ago, 2011. And it swept Silicon Valley, and it swept out of Silicon Valley. It's all over the world. I actually think in some ways it's stronger in Europe than it is in the United States. And it's hard to meet an entrepreneur who hasn't been exposed to this idea that you have hypotheses and you test them with a minimum viable product. And I think that has changed a lot. It changes a lot in combination with some other things. So especially if you look at online businesses, in 20 years ago when it was really getting started, it cost about $5 million to build an even simple website. Yeah. And you needed your own server. The server cost $300,000. You had to hire people to do all the programming. Now you can sort of drag and drop these things, and you can launch a website for $50.
Yeah, absolutely. You can have more than 100 websites and do more than 100 e-commerce websites and sell.
So if you take that trend, so it's easy to launch a business, an online business in particular, and now we have a process for figuring out whether you've got a good idea. We can run fast and cheap experiments because you don't have to spend $5 million to run the experiment. You can spend nothing. Some of this stuff is free. And so that's a big, big change. And then
agile, we are in an agile world.
Yeah, a very agile world. And then I'll actually look forward. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure people out there might be wondering, how does entrepreneurship change with COVID and post-COVID? And I think that it's very encouraging. Before the Zoom started, we were talking about how rates of entrepreneurship are up all over the world. Some of it's by necessity. People lost their jobs, so they have to try something new. And a lot of entrepreneurship works that way. It's okay. But I think we could have a boom in entrepreneurship around the world for two reasons after COVID. One is it's a demand side. There's a demand effect and a supply effect. The demand effect is we've changed. Here we are on Zoom. We work and live differently. We order food online. We work differently. We're used to these tools, online tools for collaboration. So there's going to be every change creates opportunity for entrepreneurs. Streaming video, applications that let people work together online, food delivery services. Lots of entrepreneurial dark kitchens where an entrepreneur, a chef can create something and you don't have to come to him, but he can send it out to you. Fantastic. And so that's the demand side. The supply side is we've learned how to work in different places. I could be sitting anywhere on the planet right now. We could be having this conversation.
Absolutely.
And that means you don't have to be in Berlin or Silicon Valley or New York City or London to launch a startup. I think we're going to see more entrepreneurship all over the world, and that creates opportunity for entrepreneurs who live in different places. So those are going to be, I think, good things.
And what can corporate innovators, corporate leaders from large multinationals learn from this, from the rise of this world and can learn from the startups management world, because they look very pachyderms. They look like elephants in respect to this.
Yeah, but they know that they have to innovate and the smart ones try to figure out how to have entrepreneurs inside the company. And so I've actually spent some time, it's not in the book, but I've spent some time with colleagues at Harvard Business School, but also practitioners who work with big corporations, trying to help them be more entrepreneurial. And the question we ask is, are the reasons for startup failure the same as the reason for the failure of entrepreneurial projects inside a big company?
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And the answer was no. The failure patterns are very, very different. And the reason why entrepreneurial projects inside a big company often fail are lack of alignment between what the venture wants to do and needs to do and what the corporate office, what the top will allow. Sometimes the new project is a threat to the core business, and you worry about cannibalization. Sometimes the new project is a threat to the core because they want engineers, they want marketers, they want money. and the politics inside the big company will kill the baby.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly. So an entrepreneur inside a big company, well, we need this supply to do. We need this to do what we're going to do. Oh, whenever we source things, we need two suppliers so we can pit them again. Well, there aren't two suppliers, or it takes too much time, or and the lawyers. You want to run minimum viable product tests and put our brand on this product that's made out of shoestring and bubble gum. No, but we're only going to run the test with 50 customers. No, you can't do it. That's not with the brand. You'll destroy the brand. No, it's only 50 customers. We can apologize if it's bad. And the lawyers, have to review every contract. Yeah, bureaucracy, huge problem.
We've been seeing lots of brands acquiring startups over the course of past years. So this seems to be a trend.
Yeah, and it's a big trend. Both big tech companies acquiring little tech companies, and big corporations in every business acquiring. And sometimes it works. Walmart has been slowly building its e-commerce capability by buying up startup, and often it fails because it's like a body, an organism with antibodies. The virus comes in and the antibodies swarm. Like, this is not part of our body because it's just so different. We got to get rid of
rejecting that, bouncing
exactly.
That.
Yeah, and often what the big company thinks it's doing is acquiring entrepreneurial talent. So usually the deal is we buy your company, and you have an obligation, a contract to stay with us for 18 months. And the entrepreneur does, and as the second hand on the clock sweeps across 12, 18 months and 1 second, I'm gone. Give me my stock, please.
Cool. So, Prof, we are more or less at the end of this amazing conversation. Just the last two questions, final questions. I'd like to ask, how should national or local governments better support this world, this startup ecosystem? What startups ecosystem still missing? So how can we get through from this point of view?
It's a complicated question. Anybody who's really interested in this, I send you my colleague at HBS, Josh Lerner, Lerner, has written a wonderful book about all of the failed government projects all around the world to encourage entrepreneurship. So there are some, in 2 minutes, I don't have time to give his answer. So if you're really interested in this, find Josh Lerner's book. I forget the title, but if you look on an online book site, Amazon, wherever, you'll find the book. The answer is, probably too many governments do too many things, and they should mostly stay out of the way. Having a great university system is the right answer. So, if it's a part of the world where the government supports the universities, keep doing that.
Totally
and grants for scientists and engineers. That's important too.
Totally agree. And how a university should evolve to create the right mindsets when it comes to their students, the right skill set, because we notice by listening to you, there is a strong problem when it comes to marketing skills, marketing application, the applications of the marketing skills.
Yeah.
And
so I think,
management also skills.
I think every person on the planet should study design, should study design thinking. This process of understanding needs, the psychology, the marketing issue, of having empathy for the customer, and then translating that understanding into many solutions, and then having a process for figuring out which solution. Anything you do in life, this is a process that will help you, and it's especially important for entrepreneurs. So, I think not only universities, but it probably should start earlier. It should probably start, in elementary school and high school.
Designing. designing, projecting, and of course.
And again, here for your listeners who are in Europe, Europe is better at this than the United States. So keep doing that.
Italian designers, they create incredible brands. We are more or less at the end. Last question, Prof. Next book coming up.
Next book. The next book won't be for the general public. It won't be for entrepreneurs either. It's going to be called Educating Entrepreneurs. And it's for other professors, not only professors, it's for people who run incubators and accelerators. I want to go all around the world to everybody who's done some creative way to educate entrepreneurs, whether it be at a university or outside a university at an accelerator, and figure out what the best practice is and share that insight. Educating entrepreneurs. Give me 5 years to write it.
Really? Wow. And there are lots of, probably we need more incubators. Still, we're still seeing lots of universities that are, they don't have an incubator, and it seems quite strange because we are in the startups age. Probably.
Now the best ones have it. The best I know in Europe right now is in Munich. It's Technische Universität München. They do an amazing job with entrepreneurship.
They do very well. And of course, we are at the end. Final greetings, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute honor to have Professor Tom EISENMANn with us for this new episode of the Books and Friends TV. It's been an amazing conversation, amazing Q&A. I officially want to greet and thank Professor Tom EISENMANn for helping us getting more about the world of startups and about his newest book called Why Startups Fail. Here we go. Published by Penguin Random House. Is now available on Amazon. I highly recommend to buy that, and we highly recommend to use that. So thanks a lot, Prof. We do look forward to your next book. How to get in touch with you? How to follow you? If someone wants to stay updated about what you
probably best on Twitter. Just my last name with a T in front of it. EISENMANN. EISENMANN on Twitter.
So Tom EISENMANN on Twitter, you can follow him and you can stay updated about his newest work and all the things in terms of knowledge and wisdom that they will share with everyone. So again, published by Penguin Random House, Why Startups Fail, and of course, I do want to greet and thank also all our listeners and participants for following us, for watching us. If you really appreciate this episode of Books and Friends TV, simply subscribe our YouTube channel. Books and Friends will be back soon with another Q&A. So we'll leave you with this quote. Failure rarely sneaks up on a founder. Professor Tom EISENMANn. Thank you, Prof.
Thanks everybody for listening. That was lots of fun.
Cheers. Bye.